There is a moment, every explorer knows it, when the jungle stops feeling like an adventure. When the thrill drains away. When the compass stops making sense. When you turn around, and every direction looks exactly the same. That moment has a name. It's called being lost. And for one man, deep in the uncharted heart of the Amazon rainforest, that moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in October. His name was Dr. Marcus Hale. And what happened to him over the next 18 days would test every limit of the human body, the human mind, and the human will to survive. But before we start the story, please subscribe to DLostChronicles channel for more mysterious story like this. Now, this is his story. Part 1, The Man and the Mission. Marcus Hale was not a reckless man. That's the first thing you need to understand. He was 43 years old. A botanist with 20 years of field experience. He had worked in the Congo Basin, the Borneo rainforests, and the highlands of Papua New Guinea. He had been in jungles before. Many times. He knew the rules. Tell someone where you're going. Carry more water than you think you need. Never travel alone after 4 p.m. Always mark your trail. Marcus knew every rule. And on the morning of October 9th, in a remote region of the Brazilian Amazon, approximately 300 kilometers from the nearest town, he broke one of them. Just one. But one was enough. The expedition had been planned for 6 months. Marcus was leading a small team of 4 researchers from a European university, searching for a rare flowering plant, a species that local indigenous communities had described in oral histories for generations but that Western science had never formally documented. The plant was called, in the local Yanomami language, something that roughly translated as, the flower that blooms only for the dead. It was said to grow only in a specific type of microhabitat, deep river gullies, where the canopy was so thick that direct sunlight never reached the ground. Marcus had a theory about where it might be found. A satellite image had shown an anomalous dark patch roughly 4 kilometers northeast of the base camp, a depression in the terrain, heavily vegetated, exactly the kind of place the plant might thrive. The team planned to investigate it on day 3 of the expedition. But on day 2, Marcus woke before dawn. He lay in his tent, listening to the jungle breathe around him, the screech of howler monkeys, the distant crack of something large moving through the undergrowth, the low hum of a billion insects going about their invisible business. And he made a decision. He would go ahead. Just to look. Just a few hours. He would be back before breakfast. He left a note on the camp table. Gone to check the northeast gully. Back by 9 a.m. He took his pack. His water. His compass. His field notebook. A machete. And he walked into the jungle alone. Part 2, The Point of No Return. For the first hour, everything went exactly as planned. Marcus moved northeast, using his compass and the angle of the pale early light filtering through the canopy to orient himself. He marked his trail the way he always did, a small cut in the bark of a tree every 30 meters, at exactly eye level. The jungle was extraordinary. Dense beyond description. The air was warm and wet, like breathing through a damp cloth. Roots erupted from the ground in great twisted arches. Vines hung from the canopy in curtains. The undergrowth was so thick that in places Marcus had to use his machete just to move forward. But he was used to this. He was in his element. At the 90-minute mark, he found the gully. It was exactly as the satellite image had suggested, a long, narrow depression running roughly east to west, its floor invisible beneath a carpet of ferns and low plants. The canopy above it was almost completely closed. The light down there was green and dim and ancient. Marcus climbed down carefully, gripping roots for handholds. And at the bottom, he stopped. He crouched down. Because there, half hidden beneath the ferns, was a plant he had never seen before. Small. Delicate. A pale, almost white stem with a single flower at its tip, a flower of an extraordinary deep purple, almost black, with a center of startling gold. He photographed it. Took samples. Made notes. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from excitement. This was it. This was what they had come for. He was so absorbed, so utterly focused on the plant in front of him, that he didn't notice the sky. He didn't notice the light changing. He didn't notice the distant rumble, far off over the canopy, growing slowly closer. The Amazon produces storms unlike anything in the temperate world. They arrive without warning. And when they arrive completely. The rain started as a sound before it was a sensation, a low roar, building from above, like a waterfall approaching from every direction at once. And then it hit. Marcus grabbed his pack and scrambled out of the gully, and within 60 seconds, the jungle had transformed. The rain was so heavy it was almost solid. Visibility dropped to a few meters. The floor of the gully, which had been dry earth a moment ago, was filling with rushing brown water. Marcus ran. He ran in the direction he thought was southwest. He ran for 15 minutes. And when he stopped, breathless, soaked, the rain still hammering down, he looked for his trail markers. The trees around him had no marks on them. He turned around. Looked in every direction. No marks. He had gone the wrong way. Part 3, Day 1. The rain lasted 4 hours. Marcus sheltered beneath the buttress roots of an enormous tree, roots that rose above his head like fins, forming a crude hollow, and waited. He used the time to think clearly. To assess. He had water. He had his field notebook, which was slightly damp but intact. He had a folded emergency foil blanket, a small first aid kit, a lighter, one energy bar, and his machete. He did not have a satellite phone. The team's sat phone was at base camp. He had left it there because he was only going for a few hours. He did not have a GPS device. The team had one unit between them, and it was locked in the equipment case, again, at base camp. He had a compass. He had his experience. And he had himself. When the rain stopped, Marcus climbed the nearest tree, a process that took 20 minutes, and left his arms shaking, to try to see above the canopy. He couldn't get high enough. The canopy of the Amazon is its own world, 60 meters above the ground. Marcus got to about 20 meters before the branches became too thin to support his weight. He could see nothing but green in every direction, stretching to the horizon. He came back down. He sat on a root. He thought. If he had run southwest, which was his intention, and overshot, he might be west of base camp, or northwest. The camp was near a small river. If he walked south and then east, he should eventually hit the river. From the river, he could follow it to camp. This was the plan. He started walking south. He marked his trail as he went. By the time it got too dark to move, the Amazon jungle at night is a total, absolute darkness, unlike anything most people have ever experienced. Marcus estimated he had walked about 2 kilometers. He made camp under the same kind of buttress roots. He did not sleep. He lay in the darkness, listening to the jungle around him, the night sounds, which were different from the day sounds, and he thought about his team waking up to find him gone. He thought about the note he had left. Back by 9 a.m. It was now, he estimated, around 9 p.m. 12 hours late. They would be looking for him. He just had to stay calm, stay safe, and keep moving toward the river. He would be out tomorrow. He was almost certain of it. Part 4, Days 2 and 3. He was not out the next day. Or the day after. On day 2, Marcus walked for 11 hours, following his compass south. He found water, a small stream, and refilled his bottle using a piece of his shirt as a filter. He found fruit, a species of euterpe palm he recognized as edible. He ate carefully. Not too much. His stomach needed the calories, but too much unfamiliar food, too fast, could cause problems he couldn't afford. He marked his trail meticulously. But the jungle refused to cooperate. The terrain was irregular. Gullies and ridges that didn't appear on any map he had. Areas of flooded ground where the water was waist deep and moving fast. Twice he had to backtrack for hours to find a way around. By nightfall on day 2, he was exhausted and disoriented. His compass told him he had been moving mostly south. But he had not found the river. On day 3, he found something else instead. Tracks. Large ones. Four-toed, deep in the mud. Spaced about 2 meters apart. Jaguar. Fresh tracks, made within the last few hours. Marcus stood very still. The jaguar is the apex predator of the Amazon. Unlike tigers or lions, jaguars don't typically view humans as prey, they avoid contact when they can. But a hungry jaguar, or a jaguar with cubs, is a different matter. And Marcus, alone in the jungle, would be a very easy target. He built a fire that night. A large one. He barely slept. But the jaguar, if it was still nearby, never came closer. He was alone again in the morning. Just him and the green. Part 5, the mind begins to work against you. By day 5, the physical challenges were severe. His boots had begun to rot, the constant moisture of the jungle was breaking down the leather and the glue. His feet were developing trench foot, the skin soft and white and beginning to crack. Every step was painful. He had a small cut on his left arm from the machete, sustained on day 3, that was showing early signs of infection, red, swollen, warm to the touch. He cleaned it twice a day with the antiseptic from his first aid kit. He rationed the antiseptic carefully. He was losing weight rapidly. The forest offered food, palm hearts, certain fruits, insects, but never enough calories to replace what he was burning. He was always hungry. Never not hungry. But the physical pain, Marcus would later say, was easier to manage than the psychological weight. Because by day 5, the mind starts to do strange things. You begin to hear things. A voice, just at the edge of hearing. Your name, called from somewhere in the trees. You spin around, heart hammering, and there is nothing. The shadows begin to move. You know, rationally, that it is light filtering through the canopy, playing tricks on your exhausted eyes. But some older, deeper part of your brain is not interested in rationality. It sees movement. It sounds the alarm. You begin to lose track of time. Hours blur. The sun arcs overhead and you can't remember if you've been walking for 3 hours or 6. You begin to talk to yourself. Not in a panicked way. Not rambling nonsense. Just, conversation. Reasoning out loud. Explaining your decisions to an imaginary companion, because the act of putting thoughts into words helps you think more clearly. Marcus talked to his daughter. Her name was Lena. She was 11 years old, and she was in school in Amsterdam while her father was dying in the Amazon jungle. He talked to her as he walked. He told her about the plants he saw. He explained which ones were edible and which ones weren't. He told her about the howler monkeys that woke him every morning. He described the color of the light through the canopy, the way it turned everything gold in the late afternoon. He talked to Lena because it kept him sane. And because, he told himself, he was going to see her again. He was not going to die here. He had decided. Part 6, The Search. Back at base camp, the search had begun within hours of Marcus being missed. His 3 team members, Dr. Farik Tashkentov, a plant geneticist, Ana Lima, a field biologist from Sao Paulo, and Jonas Weir, their logistics coordinator, had woken at 7 a.m. to find the note. By 10 a.m., when Marcus had not returned, they were worried. By noon, they were scared. By 3 p.m., Jonas had reached the nearest ranger station on the satellite phone and reported a missing person. The Brazilian authorities were notified. A local search and rescue team was assembled. Given the remoteness of the location, 300 kilometers from the nearest town, accessible only by river or small aircraft, it took until the following morning for the first search team to arrive. They began searching from the northeast, following the route Marcus's note had described. They found the gully. They found evidence that someone had been there, a boot print, a small cut branch. But the rains had washed away Marcus's trail markers. The jungle had swallowed his tracks. The search team was experienced. They were skilled. They were motivated. But the Amazon rainforest covers 5.5 million square kilometers. A man alone in that space is a needle in a continent-sized haystack. The days passed. The search expanded. Aircraft flew grid patterns. Thermal cameras swept the canopy. Nothing. Marcus's wife flew from Amsterdam to Brazil. She sat in the nearest town, in a hotel room, waiting for news that didn't come. Lena went to school every day. She didn't know how bad it was. Her mother had told her that Daddy was lost but that people were looking for him. She drew him a picture. A jungle, in green crayon. And in the middle of it, a small figure with yellow hair, her dad. She put an arrow on it, pointing at the figure. It said, "This way, Daddy." Part 7, Days 8 through 14. By day 8, Marcus had accepted that the river wasn't where he thought it was. Either he had badly misjudged his starting position, or the terrain had conspired against him in ways his compass couldn't account for. Either way, walking south had not found him the river. He changed strategy. He began following water downstream. Wherever he found a stream, he followed it. Every stream in the Amazon eventually leads to a larger stream. Every larger stream leads to a river. Every river, eventually, leads to people. This is the logic of water. It always goes somewhere. And so Marcus went where the water went. The days began to have a rhythm. Wake before dawn. Check the infection on his arm, it was holding, not getting better, but not getting worse. Drink. Eat whatever he had gathered the night before. Walk. Follow the water. Mark the trail. Stop at dusk. Build a fire. Sleep. His body was adapting in ways that surprised him. His senses sharpened. He began to hear things in the jungle that he hadn't heard in the first days, the specific calls that meant danger versus the calls that meant nothing. He began to read the undergrowth differently, finding paths and game trails he would have walked past a week earlier. He found a Brazil nut grove on day 9 and nearly wept with joy. Brazil nuts are extraordinarily caloric. He ate until he was full for the first time in days. He cached the rest, eating them slowly over the following days. On day 11, he crossed the jaguar's territory again. He saw the cat this time. It was sitting on a low branch, 20 meters away, watching him with total calm and complete indifference. It was enormous, a male, he guessed, at least 80 kilograms. Its spots were perfect in the dappled light. They watched each other for almost a full minute. Then the jaguar turned its head, as if something far more interesting had caught its attention, and disappeared into the canopy above. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He kept walking. Day 14 was the hardest. Not because anything specific happened. Nothing happened. That was the problem. Day 14 was just another identical green day, and for the first time since he had been lost, Marcus sat down against a tree at midday and felt something he had been fighting for 2 weeks. He felt despair. Not panic. Despair is quieter than panic. Heavier. He sat there for a long time. He thought about Lena. He thought about all the things he hadn't said. All the mornings he'd been too busy, too distracted, too buried in research to just sit with her at breakfast and talk. He thought about her birthday, 3 weeks away. He thought about the fact that he might not be there for it. He sat against that tree, and he cried. Properly. Completely. For a long time. And then he stood up. Picked up his machete. And kept walking. Because Lena's birthday was in 3 weeks. And he intended to be there. Part 8, The River. Day 15. Marcus heard it before he saw it. A low roar. Different from rain. Different from wind. Constant. Moving. He began to run. Through undergrowth he'd normally have cut carefully. Through mud and over roots and under hanging vines. Running. Because that sound was water. A lot of water. Moving fast. He burst through a wall of vegetation at the edge of a steep bank. And there, 10 meters below him, wide and brown and fast and the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his entire life, was a river. Not the river near base camp. He had no idea which river this was. But it was a river, and that meant he was no longer in the infinite green maze of the interior. He slid down the bank on his backside, not caring that his trousers were ruined, and stood at the water's edge. He put his hands in. He splashed his face. He looked upstream and downstream. And then he turned downstream. Always downstream. Part 9, Found. He walked the river for 2 more days. His feet were in bad shape. The infection on his arm had spread slightly, and he was running a low fever. He was barely eating. But he was moving, and the river was his road now, and roads lead to people. On the afternoon of day 17, he saw it. A dock. Wooden planks, gray with age, stretching out over the water. A dugout canoe tied at the end. And on the bank above it, just visible through the trees, a roof. Marcus opened his mouth to shout. No sound came out. His voice had been reduced to a whisper by dehydration and disuse. He tried again. A hoarse, barely audible call. Nothing. He walked to the dock. He walked up the bank. And a woman standing in a doorway, stirring something over a fire, looked up. She screamed. And then she called for her husband. The family was a river community. Indigenous people who had lived on this stretch of river for generations. They spoke no Portuguese. Marcus spoke no words of their language. But they brought him inside. They gave him water. Then broth. Then food, slowly, carefully. The woman examined his arm. She applied something, a paste, dark green, with a smell like pine and something else, and wrapped it in clean cloth. That night, Marcus slept in a real bed, a narrow platform of wood with a woven mat. For the first time in 17 days. He slept for 14 hours. Part 10, Home. The family's eldest son made the journey by canoe to the nearest river settlement, where there was a radio. The rescue coordinator received the call at 6 a.m. on day 18. Marcus Hale was alive. He was evacuated by helicopter that afternoon, the same helicopter that had been searching for him for over 2 weeks, that had flown hundreds of hours of grid patterns over the canopy, that had carried his team's desperate hope across hundreds of kilometers of green. When the helicopter landed at the hospital in Manaus, 3 people were waiting. His team, Farrick, Anna, Jonas. And his wife. Marcus Hale stepped off the helicopter, thin, bearded, limping, his left arm in a fresh bandage, his eyes bright, and his wife walked toward him and they held each other in the middle of that tarmac for a very long time. She had something in her hand. A piece of paper. A jungle, drawn in green crayon. A small figure with yellow hair. An arrow. This way, Daddy. Marcus read it. And the man who had survived 18 days alone in the Amazon rainforest, the man who had navigated by compass through storms, who had found food and water in a world designed to swallow you whole, who had sat against a tree on day 14 and cried and then got up and kept walking, that man stood on the tarmac in Manaus and cried again. Because he had made it. Because Lena's birthday was in 2 weeks. And he was going to be there. In conclusion, Marcus Hale spent 12 days in hospital in Manaus. He lost 19 kilograms during his time in the jungle. He had early-stage sepsis from the arm infection, trench foot, mild malnutrition, and what the doctors described as remarkable overall resilience for a man his age who had been through what he had been through. He recovered fully. The plant he had discovered in the gully, the one that started everything, was formally documented and named 6 months after his rescue. The scientific name they chose was complex, technical, the way scientific names always are. But the field team gave it a second name. An informal one. They called it Lena's flower. Marcus returned to fieldwork 8 months later. He always carries a satellite phone now. And he never, ever goes anywhere alone. The Amazon rainforest is vast beyond comprehension. It has been breaking people for 500 years, explorers, conquistadors, scientists, adventurers. It does not yield to will or intelligence or experience. But Marcus Hale made it through. Not because he was the strongest. Not because he was the most skilled. But because on day 14, sitting against a tree in the middle of the largest jungle on Earth, he thought of an 11-year-old girl with a green crayon. And he decided he wasn't finished yet. The jungle, in the end, could not argue with that. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.